Welcome to Module 1, Vocabulary and Context. When you're reading and you come across a word that you don't know, what do? Come on, be honest with me. Do you stop and take out your trusty dictionary to look up the word? Do you skip it and move on? Well, a dictionary is certainly a useful tool and has its place, but what if what you're reading is pretty complicated? It would be very time-consuming to stop and look up the definitions of all your unknown words. Also, this would stop the flow of your reading pace and have a negative impact on your comprehension. Now, to skip it and move on is not always a huge problem. If it's just one word, you might be able to skip it and still understand the passage as a whole. But if the problem occurs again in a more complicated passage, you could skip enough words and move on and find yourself saying, "Huh? What did I just read? What was that all about?" If there are too many words you don't know, or if that one word you keep skipping is the topic and thus part of your main idea, you could be in big trouble. I'm here to tell you that the best thing to do when you come across a word that you don't know is to use vocabulary and context skills. Context refers to the words, sentences, and language that surround your unknown word. Now, textbook authors are sometimes kind enough to provide you definitions of unknown words. For example, textbook authors know that you are being introduced to lots of new and important key terms and phrases, so they put that word in bold or italicize it, and then they just simply give you the definition. But this doesn't always happen. In that case, when you're not given the definition, you can use examples, synonyms, antonyms, the general sense of the passage, and word parts to help you figure out unknown words. Let's take a look at our first type of context clue. And that one is example. Authors may include an example to help illustrate or explain an unknown word. So what happens is, sometimes you'll come across a word that's brand new, you don't know what it means, and the author might define it for you, but sometimes the definition is even so complicated you still have no idea what the word means. And authors know this. They understand that by giving you an example, that will really illustrate for you what the meaning of the word is. And a lot of times what they do is they use these clue words that let you know that an example's coming up. Now, sometimes it's an obvious example clue word, like the word for example, or it might be for instance, could be including, and another one would be such as. Let's take a look at an example of an example context clue. Many people readily admit that they are hypochondriacs. For example, Travis once thought he had a flesh-eating virus when he found a mysterious red spot on his arm, and Kevin need only sneeze and he is convinced it's pneumonia. So let's say you're reading this and you come across the word hypochondriacs and you think, I have no idea what a hypochondriac is. Well, here the author is letting you know that he's going to give you an example of what a hypochondriac is. So we have Travis, who finds this mysterious little red spot on his arm, and now he's convinced he has a flesh-eating virus. And then we come across Kevin, and all he has to do is sneeze, and now he is convinced that he has pneumonia. So now you might be thinking, maybe being a hypochondriac means I always think I'm really sick, or I might have a minor illness and I blow it out of proportion. And you would be correct. That's just what a hypochondriac is. Okay, let's take a look at our next type of context clue. Our next type of context clue is a synonym. A synonym is a word that means the same as another word. This means that the author may provide another word of similar meaning to the word that you don't know. So when you see a word that you don't know, look around it for a word that you do know. If you could substitute that word that you know for the unknown word, and it generally makes sense, that's your clue. It'll make more sense when we look at it with an example. Here we have Katie, and Katie often feels enervated by the Florida heat in August. She is too tired to move. So here we have our unknown word, enervated. Now some of you may need only to read right here the part about Florida heat in August, and that might be your big clue as to what enervated means. If you've ever been in Florida in August and you felt that heat, that's a clue as to what the word enervated means. But if you've never been to Florida before, or you've never been here in August, the synonym clue is right here. She is too tired. So you think to yourself, I think that might be another word that means the same thing as this one. And if we substitute it, Katie often feels too tired in the Florida heat in August makes perfect sense. So now we know what that word means. Okay, so that was our synonym context clue. And remember, a synonym is a word that means the same as another word. Our next type of context clue is an antonym. Now, an antonym context clue can be confusing, but it's better than having no context clue at all. An antonym is a word that means the opposite of a word. Antonyms can be useful but tricky context clues because authors use them to explain the meaning of an unknown word through contrast. Now, the good thing is that authors will usually give you clues to let you know that they're setting up the meaning of the unknown word by presenting its contrast. So if you see words like however, but, yet, on the other hand, or in contrast, those are signals to you that you're going to see an antonym clue. So let's take a look at one of those examples. Amber's writing professor taught her it is acceptable to use colloquial words when writing emails and texts. On the other hand, when writing an academic paper, she should use more formal language. So we have this word here, colloquial, and we think to ourselves, we have no idea what colloquial means. We're in big trouble. Well, now the author gives us the clue, on the other hand, that lets us know that what's coming up means the opposite of colloquial. So when she's writing emails and texts, she can use these types of words. But when she's writing an academic paper, she should use more formal language. Oh, okay. So the opposite of formal would be informal. So her writing professor has taught her it is acceptable to use informal words or slang when writing emails and texts. But for academic papers, she has to be more formal. Okay. Our next type of context clue is the general sense of the passage. Sometimes you have to look at all of the details in a sentence or passage to figure out the meaning of one unknown word. When given a choice, you want to choose the word that seems the most logical. An example will better illustrate what I mean here. Okay, here we have Jennifer. Jennifer begged her mom to let her go on the spring break trip, and she was thrilled when her mom acquiesced. What does this word acquiesced mean? Okay, so the fact that Jennifer begged her mom for something lets us know that in general, this must be a good thing or something she wants. So then when her mom acquiesces, Jennifer is thrilled. So once again, this must be a good thing if she was thrilled. Well, if she begged and then was thrilled when her mom did this acquiesced thing, she must have gotten what she wanted. Therefore, I'm going to infer or make the logical and educated guess that to acquiesce must mean to give consent or to give in. So if I substitute the words gave in down here and it makes sense, then I will know that I am on the right track to figuring out what this word means. So Jennifer begged her mom to let her go on the spring break trip, and she was thrilled when her mom gave in. She was thrilled when her mom gave her consent. Yep. Now we know what the word acquiesce means. The final type of context clue that you can use to figure out unknown words is word parts. You might be familiar with prefixes, suffixes, and roots. Prefixes are the word parts added to the beginning of a word, suffixes are added to the end, and roots are the part of the word that make up the basic meaning. Well, how do we use these word parts to figure out the meaning of unknown words? Let's start with an easy one. Let's take a look at the word submarine. And let's pretend that you've never seen this word before and you have absolutely no idea what it means. So what you would want to do is see if you could break up the word into parts that you do know. So you would break it up right here. And now you have sub and marine. So you say to yourself, okay, sub. Well, I know that a subway is a train that goes underground, so maybe sub means under. And then you look at the marine part. And you would say, well, I know that a marine has something to do with the water, so maybe a submarine is something that goes under the water. And as you know already, you would be correct. So by breaking up the word when it's unfamiliar into parts that are familiar to you, you can figure out unknown words. Let's try another one. Mortician. Well, Let's think about words you know that have the word part mort in them. Do you know any words that have the word part mort in them? Maybe you know about a mortuary, which is another word for a funeral home. Or maybe you know that your mortal enemy is the enemy who wants to see you die. Or the fact that if you are immortal, then you can't die, you live forever. Maybe you've seen that old show, The Addams Family, where there was a character named Morticia, and she looked like death. And if I'm mortified, I'm so embarrassed I could die. So I might not know exactly what a mortician is, but I'm getting the idea that it has something to do with death. If you're thinking along those lines, you would be on the right track. A mortician is the funeral director who performs the tasks of preparing a dead body. Oh, now this is all starting to get really very morbid, so let's try another example. How about this word? Revitalize. Okay, seems to mean to do something again, like to repeat something, or redo something, or retry something. Let's take a look at this part here. Vite. Well, vital signs are what a doctor checks to make sure that you are alive. And something that is vital to your survival means that you need it in order to be alive. And vitamins are what you take to help you live a long, healthy life. So maybe to revitalize means to live again. And if you're thinking on that track, once again, you're on the right track. Yes, to revitalize something means to give it new life. For example, neighborhoods that fall on hard times can be revitalized when young families move in and new businesses move in. So it brings the family back to life. Okay, let's see you put all these context clues to use. Try using context clues to figure out the meaning of each of the underlined words in the following examples. Here we have, why do you want to fritter away your hard-earned paychecks on new designer purses and shoes that you don't need? Can you use context clues to figure out what this word fritter means? Fritter means to waste. Here you want to use the general sense of the passage. Those paychecks are hard-earned, and you are spending them on items that you don't need. This would be a waste of your money. So yes, to fritter away something means to waste it away. How about this example? The instructor's explanation of comma use was esoteric. It would have been much easier to understand if he had told me, when in doubt, leave the comma out. So here's our unknown word. Can you use a context clue to figure out what it means? Here, esoteric means difficult to understand. An antonym clue is used. We said that the explanation would have been much easier to understand had he just said, when in doubt, leave the comma out. Now, that's not necessarily the right way to think about using commas, but it is much easier to understand than a long, drawn-out discussion of all the comma rules. How about this one? It was presumptuous of Jenny to assume Michael would ask her out on a date, but she was happy when he did. Can you use your context clues to figure out what the word presumptuous means? Here you want to look at the synonym clue. To assume. It was presumptuous of Jenny to assume Michael would ask her out on a date. So there we had a synonym context clue. What about this one? After the surgery, I noticed that my arm had started to atrophy. For example, it was much thinner than my left arm, and I could barely lift a 3-pound weight. So here we have the unknown word atrophy. What does that mean? Atrophy means to waste away, and we used the clues, for example, here to let you know that now my arm that I had surgery on, my right arm, is much thinner than my left, and now I could barely lift a 3-pound weight. So the examples show that I don't have strength anymore in that arm I just had surgery on. So it's atrophying. My arm is atrophying, the muscle is atrophying, my strength, it's just wasting away. What about this one? In my new position of assistant teacher, I was subordinate to the lead. Even though I knew more about preschool children than she did, her degree made her my superior. Can you use context clues to figure out the meaning of the word subordinate? There's lots of clues here. The other teacher is the lead, and I am the assistant. I know that sub means below, and Down here it says that she's my superior, so it looks like I'm working under this person, and that would be correct. A subordinate is somebody who is a lower rank. Okay, so what have we learned about vocabulary and context? We've learned that it is best not to skip a word and move on when reading. The best thing to do is to use context clues, which, remember, context clues are the words, the language, and the sentences that surround your unknown word. We learned that authors can use examples, synonyms, antonyms, or the general sense of the passage to hint or suggest meaning. And we've learned that we can utilize our knowledge of word parts. And by the way, this is where knowing another language may come in handy. A lot of the English language is based on Latin and Greek roots and prefixes and suffixes, just like many other languages. So for example, I took French, and in French, the word for a library is bibliothèque. So that might help me figure out that this word part here has something to do with books. So knowing another language can come in very handy when you're trying to figure out unknown words in English. Improving your use of context clues can help you expand your vocabulary repertoire. What's a repertoire? Look, I was kind enough to give you the definition. That's your stock of skills or techniques. And it's important to improve your vocabulary because that's what's going to make comprehension easier for you when reading. It will make it easier for you to be able to speak. It will help you when you're listening because if people are throwing around big words, then you'll find it an easier time figuring out what those words mean, and it's also going to make writing much easier for you. So it didn't take us very long to go through the skill of vocabulary and context, but just because it didn't take us that long doesn't at all mean that it's not an important skill. Increasing your vocabulary repertoire will really help you a lot in all aspects of school and your job and your life.